What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show podcast. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, from National College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer of the Wolves Football. Got a fun show planned for you guys today, debuting a new segment called Four Downs, where we go over four news topics in the world of college football. We'll be talking about that here on the show, and I'll be joined by Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football, my colleague over there. We will talk a good 50 minutes on Kentucky football. What went wrong with the Kentucky Wildcats this season? This was a team that a lot of people and yours truly projected to finish second in the SEC East. I had them winning 10 games this year. Why didn't that happen? What went wrong this season? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Will Levis, and we will get Kevin's thoughts on the Music City Bowl, where Kentucky will play Iowa as well. Remember, you check out the Phillip Jordan Show over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check out the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Show YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on a video, and I'll read it on a future edition of the show. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. And you can email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. All right, starting a new segment here on the show called Four Downs. So it'll be four news items we'll talk about here on the show. And let's kick it off with first down. Caleb Williams, of course, on Saturday won the Heisman Trophy. He came in first with 2,031 points. 544 first-place points. Of course, on the year, 66% completion percentage, 37 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, 372 yards, rushing on the season, 10 touchdowns. Coming in second was Max Duggan. He had 1,420 points, and he had C.J. Stroud and Stetson Bennett wrapping up the four that were there. And then coming in fifth was Hendon Hooker, which a lot of people thought should have been there, which I believe they shouldn't have invited Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker deserved to be there at this. Of course, we know he's not going to win because of the injury and just kind of how the season ended for Tennessee. The number 6, Bryce Young, the Heisman Trophy winner from last year. Now, some could say he was the MVP of the season. I kind of in that round of thinking there too as well, but just because of what he meant for Alabama, and Alabama's not even nowhere near the discussion. Playoff, been a really good team if it was not for Bryce Young. It was funny, Caleb Williams did bring up the fact is that he was, he won the Heisman Trophy, but Max Duggan, C.J. Stroud, and Stetson Bennett all are going to go play in the playoff, which the only quarterback missing from the college football playoff is J.J. McCarthy from Michigan. But this is the third player coached by Lincoln Riley to win the Heisman Trophy in the last 6 years. Of course, you had Baker Mayfield, you had Kyler Murray. Jalen Hurts was a finalist his year there at Oklahoma. So Lincoln Riley, whether he is at Oklahoma or USC, he is getting Heisman Trophy winners there with him. A really good coach, really does a good job with the quarterbacks. Now, second down. Auburn has hired their new coordinators. First, let's go to new defensive coordinator Ron Roberts. He was with Baylor the last 3 years under Dave Aranda. In 2021, which was last season when Baylor won the Big 12, and they did beat Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl last year. They had one of the top 10 scoring defenses in the country, top 10. Very good defense for Baylor last year. They took a big dip this year. He got fired from Baylor, but now he will be the new Auburn defensive coordinator. And then new offensive coordinator for Auburn will be Phillip Montgomery, 43-53 as a head coach at Tulsa over the last 8 seasons. He was 5-7 this season before they fired him. He worked at Baylor under Art Briles from 2008 to 2014. Baylor offenses were great at that time. Now, a lot of people give a lot of credit to that to Briles. Montgomery's there, which led to him becoming the head coach at Tulsa. His big claim to fame there was in 2011. He worked with Heisman Trophy winner Robert Griffin III. And the next third down will kind of connect to this to a degree. But a big thing for Auburn is still replenishing talent, getting players. Can you get some players from the transfer portal? Getting some better players. Both sides of the ball, because Auburn's going to have a lot of players to replace because Tank Bigsby on Monday announced he was going to go to the National Football League, which that was expected. And, of course, on the defense side of the ball, Auburn is losing players over there as well. So it's going to be a big thing for Auburn to replace some players over there because, of course, you're losing Derek Hall, your leader on defense, and your leader on offense, Tate Bigsby, headed to the National Football League. All right, third down. Coastal Carolina quarterback Grayson McCall will enter the transfer portal. He is a 3-time Sun Belt Player of the Year, 28-4 as a starter for Coastal Carolina. Oddly enough, though, he will play in the bowl game for Coastal Carolina in the Birmingham Bowl on December 27th when they play East Carolina. That's not something you see. Players don't usually play in bowl games with the team after they done hit the transfer portal. But Grayson McCall will play that final game for Coastal Carolina. Of course, head coach Jamie Chadwell left the team after the Sun Belt Championship game, and he is now going to be the head coach there at Liberty. Looking at his career, 8,019 yards passing, 70% completion percentage, 78 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. So you're looking at a quarterback with Grayson McCall that does not turn the ball over. In his career, rushing over 1,000 yards and 16 rushing touchdowns. This year, 69% completion percentage, 2,630 yards, 24 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, 5 rushing touchdowns as well. He missed a good bit of time or a few games there toward the end of the season due to injury. He came back and played in the Sun Belt Championship game, which obviously that was a big blowout for the Troy Trojans. Now, the question is now, where will Grayson McCall go? Now, there has been some chatter that Auburn could be a favorite for Grayson McCall. And when you look at Grayson McCall, that would be a pretty good fit for what he does, put him in the Hugh Freeze offense. That's why I said third down kind of connects to second down here on 4 downs. Keith Niebuhr of AuburnLive.com reported that Tigers should be favorites. And obviously there's going to be some interest there. And like I said, when you look at Hugh Freeze's offense and what Grayson McCall can do, he does not turn the ball over. Only 8 interceptions in his 3-year career there at Coastal Carolina. He's got a 70% completion percentage. He's a good runner. He's a good passer. So he checks all the right boxes at quarterback position. And just looking at some other quarterback news, Graham Mertz, he is a guy everybody was assuming going to Kentucky. He did visit with Florida. And then another quarterback that's been mentioned now, this guy has been mentioned for a lot of schools, Devin Leary. I've seen some Notre Dame chatter with him, but also Auburn. So more Auburn conversation with quarterbacks. You'll see him there as well. And Devin Leary is also visiting with Kentucky. So some interesting movement there at the quarterback position right now with the transfer portal. Have not seen a guy announce where he's actually going to go. But those are some names that are out visiting some teams, and we can see hopefully soon where they are going to land. 4th down. All right, everybody. So you've all seen the story. Mike Leach, medical emergency on Sunday, which turned out per the Clarion Ledger, a massive heart attack. Defensive coordinator Zach Arnett has taken over the football program in Mike Leach's absence. Of course, they are scheduled to play Illinois in the ReliaQuest Bowl on January 2nd. Just a tough situation. Mike Leach, he is in critical condition. Everybody loves Mike Leach. I guess not everybody loves Mike Leach, but a lot of people love Mike Leach. And, obviously for the funny comments, he says in post-game interviews, pre-game interviews, halftime interviews, one of the real true pioneers of the sport with the air raid. Of course, started with how Mummy, you'll hear me and Kevin talk about this, about Coach Leach in our conversation that you are about to hear. I recorded that before I recorded this. Obviously, thoughts and prayers with Mike Leach, the family, the Bulldog team, everybody there involved. You hope and pray that Mike Leach keeps fighting and we can get a miracle in this situation. And, of course, the power of prayer can bring that. So thoughts and prayers are with Mike Leach and his family, friends, the team, everybody involved and surrounding Mike Leach at that time because they really could use it right now. That support is the most important thing right now. All right, now it's going to be my conversation with my cohort, my colleague over at Last Word on College Football. Kevin McGuffey covers Kentucky. We go about 15 minutes talking Kentucky football. So I hope you guys will enjoy our conversation. All right, welcome in everybody again to the Phillip Jordan Show. We're having malfunctions here on the show. Anyways, I am Phillip Jordan, Last Word College Football. Of course, you know that from the open. Joining me on the show on today, on Tuesday, is not Coach Max Howell. So, you can just readjust some things. I am joined by Last Word on College Football's Kevin McGuffey, my teammate from over there where he covers Kentucky. He did a good job with our bowl coverage all year long, bowl projections and all good stuff, and contributor over at Mark Rogers TV. And Kevin, how you doing? I guess I'm not doing well because I not to hit to turn the loop off here on StreamYard with that little intro. For the live video audience, they're getting that malfunction, but for the audio podcast audience, you will not. So you guys don't even know what we're talking about. But Kevin, it's always good to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Phillip. And hey, I like the open. It's so nice. You just play it a couple of times. I've been there. My real job in the TV world, I've been known to have that happen too. I'm sorry for everyone who's expecting Coach Howell, but I promise we're going to, over the next little bit, we'll probably talk about a lot of football and who knows what else, because that's what always happens when the two of us get together. And yes, again, thank you for having me on. I always really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, you kind of get in a routine, and in a good routine, when you had the same two people on, because every Tuesday was Coach Howell, Thursday Matt Lowe. So now when I've kind of gone back to having different people on the show every week, it's kind of been a little bit of a different. I was almost worried I was going to call you Coach Max Howell. I'm just used to saying that on Monday nights when we record with him. But yeah, Kevin, as always, the season has come and gone. Regular season, we're about to hit the bowl games this Friday, which, hey, there was college football on this past Saturday, Army, Navy, and I watched some FCS playoff action. But, man, I've said this to, I think, everybody I've had on the last week. College football is one of the things where we look at the NFL, they still got 4 or 5 weeks left in the regular season. College football just flies by. It was a fun season, but it really just fly by.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, bowl season is one of my favorite, favorite times of the year. I'll get up at, they had a game at like 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning or something, I would probably get up and watch it. I've always enjoyed the bowl games, and I always thought they were a lot of fun. And then that kind of spurred my interest in the whole bowl projections thing, because another one of our Last Word folks, Jason Ray, for a while did it. Then he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. And I was like, hey, I've always wanted to take a shot at this. And, and it's worked out pretty well. I didn't quite get Brett McMurphy status this year as far as getting all the games right, but we'll get into that. But yeah, bowl season is here. It's starts with a couple games on Friday and then 7 games on Saturday, and I can't wait. So let's get going.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it on Saturday, because this past Saturday, while I do say there was a little bit of college football action, because Kevin, here's my setup. I get up about 10 o'clock Central Time on Saturday mornings. I sleep in just so I can be ready for the whole day. I've got 2 TVs set up in my room. I'm ready to go all day long. I felt weird Saturday. I'm not going to lie. It felt weird not doing that. So this Saturday, we've got, like you said, 7 bowl games. And look, I know predominantly college football talk here, but there's going to be 3 NFL games on Saturday as well. So my feet will be propped up once again. This Saturday will feel more natural versus this past Saturday. Love Army, Navy.
Right.
Congratulations to Army, our old Mike Laval. Congratulations to his team winning there. Yep. But I'm ready for a full day of football again on Saturday. I'm not quite ready to let that go yet. Not quite ready to let it go yet.
No, not at all. And the Army Navy game was a really, 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 really good game. And I checked out, as you said, there was one of the FCS playoff games. Watched a little bit of that, and then of course had to check out Kentucky basketball because they were playing against Yale on Saturday. Not the most exciting game, but it was a win. That's at this point a dub. A dub is a good thing, so we'll take it right now. So, but yes, I'm ready to go, and can't wait for all the bowl games to get up and going. And then I see Kentucky has theirs on December 31st. So against Iowa, yay. So and sorry to anyone from the great state of Iowa who's listening to this, but you guys probably feel the exact same way. So anyway, I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, that is our fourth piece of business. Our first piece of business, and obviously people watching this video on YouTube, listen to the podcast. You see the title of the episode, and I'm just going to throw the question out there. Just let you wax poetically, Kevin. What went wrong with the 2022 Kentucky Wildcats? Because my preseason prediction, I had them as a 10-win team, finishing second in the SEC East, which I think a lot of people did. Thought they were a 10-win team, which I've got the results wrote down to what happened during the season here as well in my notes. But for you, what went wrong this season with them? Because obviously 75 is not where they thought they would be.
Right. And it's funny because at this point in Mark Stoops' 10th season, you would have never thought that Kentucky would be to the point where 7-5 would be considered a disappointing season. However, 2 10-win seasons in the last 4 years, and a lot of the guys they had coming back. I could cheat and just say it was a whole bunch of things. And really, I think they got off to not having Chris Rodriguez for the first 4 games, I think hurt. And then when he finally got in there, it took a while. He did really well the first game back, but still getting all that, all the pieces back in place. Because for the first part of the season, I think Will Levis and Rodriguez were only on the field maybe a quarter and a half and the first half of the season for Kentucky, which is kind of crazy. Obviously, I think injuries to Will Levis. I know we're going to talk about him. He had the foot injury, turf toe, whatever you want to call it, in the Ole Miss game. He had a nagging shoulder injury, and quite frankly, he spent a lot of the season running for his life. Ultimately, I think one of the biggest things is probably the offensive line. They did not perform up to the standards that Kentucky fans have expected out of the Big Blue Wall these last few years. You think about all the issues that Kentucky had rushing the ball, even with Rodriguez, they ranked down near the bottom in rushing offense. When do you ever think you were going to hear a Kentucky team be like that? Honestly, I think things just didn't gel with the new offensive coordinator. Liam Cohen left, did not want to leave Kentucky, turned down several NFL jobs. It was only when Sean McVay, his old boss, called him and said, "Hey, come back to LA with me," when he finally left. And I know we're probably going to get into that too, because it looks like he's on his way back now. But they hired Rich Scangarello who'd been with the 49ers. And, sometimes things just don't work out. They don't mix. And to use a John Calipari basketball term, he unfortunately turned out to be a one and done here at Kentucky. I think I
didn't know which one you was going to go with there. I didn't know if he's going to call Kentucky a basketball school when you did that.
No, I'm not. We're not. Yeah, that was. I won't be quiet on that one. But that some people should have just not said anything, and some people in charge at that school should have jumped in and stopped it, and they didn't. But we'll leave it at that. But anyway, like I said, the offensive. Some people thought that his system was too complicated. Too pro-oriented. You could throw out a lot of things, but at the end of the day, most Kentucky fans would be pretty happy with a 7-5 season. But with the raised expectations that we've had over the last few years, it does. It seems like a disappointment, because I had them going. I actually had them. You had them winning more games than I did. I think I had them going 9-3, and I had them going to what used to be the Outback Bowl. Now it's the ReliaQuest Bowl, and play Michigan State. And well, see how that worked out, because Michigan State didn't make a bowl either. But I think it's a combination of the injuries. I think that the offensive line, the guys that they lost from last season just turned out to be, a greater loss than what we all had anticipated leading into the season. And I think you'll see them really go after some offensive linemen in the transfer portal. And they've already picked up one guy, Tanner Bowles, who is from Bowling Green here in Kentucky, originally signed with Alabama and is now coming back to Kentucky. So I think that's one area where you're gonna see them really hit. And then obviously, no offense to anyone that's on the team right now, but they're gonna find a quarterback. And Graham Mertz was a name that's been thrown about from Wisconsin. He visited, I think, late last week. Some people kind of jumped the gun saying he's committed, he's coming, and then he was at Florida this past weekend. But now, as we're talking on this Monday night, Devin Leary from North Carolina State is apparently going to visit Kentucky. So, to me, no offense against Graham, but if Leary is healthy, he had that injury, missed part of the season. If he's healthy, I think he would be a great choice. But back to the original title, I think it's a combination of injuries, offensive line, the new offensive scheme just didn't work out. Put all those together, and you got a 7-5, and a disappointing 7-5 because of some of the games they lost. You think about losing to South Carolina. Now that was the game that Will Levis did not play. Kaya Sharon stepped in. I thought did a pretty good job. And then of course they lost to Vanderbilt. First SEC win for Vandy in 26 games. It's kind of hard to make excuses on that one, other than just credit Vandy. They outplayed Kentucky that night. So there you go. Offensive line play, injuries, and the offensive scheme just didn't work for whatever reason. That's my answer for what went wrong.
Yeah, and all those things, I agree with you. Just, watching from a guy, an outsider's perspective on Kentucky, just a guy that watches all these teams play. But early in the year, you could tell offensive line was an issue because the running game was not there. I mean, of course, Chris Rodriguez was not playing, but Kentucky's got capable running backs behind him. Kavase Smoke has shown in his career capability of being a good backup to him, someone that could carry the load when Chris Rodriguez wasn't there, wasn't, getting rest, whatever the case may be. The offensive line struggled early, and you look at it, Will Levis got sacked 37 times this season versus 16 from the year before.
Right.
And look, we love talking about these quarterbacks, Will Levis, and we'll probably talk about, what Kentucky's got two solid freshman receivers this year, and Barry and Brown and Dan Key. Very impressed with what they ever do. Whoever is the quarterback for Kentucky next year's got two weapons to play with there. Running back, obviously, we know it's going to be a thing, but it all starts up front.
Right.
If you can't block up front, doesn't matter who your running backs are. The running game got better, I think, when Chris Rodriguez came back. That's just because he's a really talented back. But yeah, just the offensive line, it just started from there. And even in those first 4 games when they started 4-0, you could tell that was an issue.
Yeah, because you look at some of those games. A couple of those games were a lot closer, probably, than they should have been. I think Northern Illinois and maybe one of the others escapes. Of course, they did beat Florida. That's honestly probably going down right now as the highlight of the season. Beating Florida for back-to-back years for the first time since the 1970s. If I get to my little year-end thing where I do like best win, worst loss, obviously worst loss. We know that one. But yeah, it's, as I said, just, some of the guys that they thought were going to be were just going to step right in and fill in for the guys who had graduated or, decided to try for the NFL. It just didn't work. And like I said, if your offensive line's not clicking and and you can't run the ball and your quarterback's kind of running for his life, it's not a recipe for a real successful season.
Yeah. And you look at the 4-0 start, which, okay, people probably holler at me the schedule. I don't know, but Miami, Ohio, Florida, Youngstown State, Northern Illinois. In those 4 games, start 4-0, you're averaging 31.3 points per game. You finish the season 3-5. Rest of the way, 17.5 points per game. And I'll kind of get into the overall. This year, they were worse than the SEC in points per game. I mean, they were bottom of the conference in a lot of offensive categories, and really. I'm not a guy, I know a lot of people do, that looks at the stats every single week, but I did for this. I was actually surprised, kind of reminded me that I knew Kentucky's offense wasn't where it was last year under Cohen, but still, to make that was a big drop off. But you look at the Ole Miss game, they should have won that game, in my opinion.
Well, also, sorry to interrupt. What went wrong? Special teams. I don't know if that's where you were going, but
I
yeah,
was,
that was
especially an Ole Miss game. Because I think that was one of the games
mm-hmm.
where I tweeted or posted something on Facebook and you comment on it. That was an issue. The field goal kicking situation, and I believe extra points was an issue in that game. And then let's just face it, you had two opportunities at the end of the game inside the red zone to take the lead, and obviously they thought they took the lead at one point, but they weren't set. And then the next play, Will Levis gets hit, fumbled, and the game's over. You should have won that. And look, I know David Knight, our South Carolina guy, listens from time to time. So I'm sorry, David. I hope you do not take too much offense what I'm about to say. South Carolina only won that game because I believe Will Levis plays. That's a different ball game. I think
so too.
Yeah, it's just a different football game. It just says, that happens. All right, and so then the Tennessee game, it was going to be tough. The way they were playing at that point, that was just going to be tough. I mean, I just admit I thought maybe Kentucky could slow the game down, but they couldn't get anything going offensively early. Tennessee's defense actually played well that way.
No, Tennessee was just that was just like the perfect storm of, and even as the Kentucky person, it's sometimes it's hard for me to pick against Kentucky. I didn't think they were going to win that game. I thought if they kept it within 2 touchdowns, it would have been an accomplishment. But no, I mean that was probably, for Tennessee, right up there. Not maybe right up there with the Alabama game, but I'm sure they took great joy in that. And it was that that along with Vandy was probably the rock bottom of the season. And I think also it goes back to the offensive system. If you watch some of those games, they got too cute. I like to think like down around the end zone. The old saying, go with what brung you. If you were doing those little passes, you mentioned Dane Key and Barry and Brown. They're honestly, even as freshmen, probably two of the best receivers Kentucky's had, and maybe since the days of Keenan Burton and Stevie Johnson back, which is going on 15 years ago. They had a system. Like I said, it seemed like they always tried to get too cute around the goal line. And it's not just Kentucky. If you watch football in general, people, you'll see teams, they do this, they'll run their offense, drive down the field, get inside like the 10-yard line. And it's like, oh, let's do a double reverse. And because I can't remember if that was the Ole Miss game, but that happened in one of the games this year with Kentucky. They tried to run a double reverse and it was either intercepted or fumbled. And, it's like, just go with what you can do. But anyway, so, but yeah, like I said, the special team, but back to your point, the special teams, because, Matt Ruffalo had done a really good job in the years prior at Kentucky. And it just seemed like this year they had trouble with the long snapping. There's 2 or 3 times the ball's snapped over somebody's head. Chance Ford was a holder who's also the backup kicker, or the ball just rolls back there or something, and you don't get the laces set. But I think I've told you this before. I was high school. I was a kicker. I know the whole laces out, as opposed to and all that, and it really does make a difference. And I said that cost them the Ole Miss game. Probably cost them chances in a couple of the other losses, and to that end, they the last couple of years, Stoops hasn't really had a designated special teams coach. Just some of the guys, some of them on the staff just kind of get together and just kind of take care of it. But to that end, now they just announced today a hire of Jay Boulware, who's going to be the running backs coach and the special teams coach. So they're going to have an actual somebody who's supposed to take care of special teams, which is, what is definitely needed. Now, Boulware spent a lot of time in Oklahoma with Mike Stoops, and had recently been on Texas's staff. But then, when Tom Herman came in, he wasn't retained. And then this past year, he'd been working some with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he's, John Settle was the guy who was coaching the running backs before this, and quite frankly, the staff just wasn't happy. Just wasn't happy with his performance, and wasn't real happy with his performance on the recruiting front. So they opted to make the change almost right after the season. Right after the season was over with. So So we'll see if actually having a designated special teams coach will help in this area next year. So you have to say it can't get any worse. So
Yeah, because that did bite them against, like I said, against Ole Miss. That's the one instance. I mean, I know there's other times this season where they had some issues,
right.
with that, but the Ole Miss game, when I think about Kentucky and their special team, that was a situation where that really bit them in that one. Kind of jumping into kind of the next thing I'll talk about is Will Levis, and that obviously coming into the season, this is a guy and still projected the first round draft pick. I think some people out there looking at he did have some struggles this year, but once again, the offensive line being injured, of course, he's not going to play in the bowl game. Right. But and I was reading your most recent article over at Last Word College Football talking about some of the players that have left, and you talk about too, they didn't run Will Levis a lot this year. No. Now the foot injury, I know that was a thing, but even early in the season when he was healthy, they didn't run him because when you look at last season, he ran for 9 touchdowns, 387 yards. Kevin, have you looked up his rushing yards for this season?
Yeah, it's not pretty because all the sacks, all the sacks count in the rushing yards. So he had like minus 11 billion or something. So to that point, this was something that had been whispered about, that Scangarello told him not to run, that he wanted him as a passer and didn't want him to run and try not to get injured. And of course that didn't really happen. But then if you go back and watch the last 2 games, the Georgia game and the Louisville game, he was more back to his old self, and he ran the ball pretty well when needed. So Bright said that there's another ding against the former offensive coordinator. If that really is true, that he said, no, I don't want you running the ball. I want you to stay in the pocket and pass. And that's not really Levis's game. If you go back to when he was at Penn State, he was, Sean Clifford was the passer and Levis was the running back when he was, or the running quarterback when he was behind Clifford at Penn State. For them to come in and not have him want him to run the ball is just another, like I said, just another puzzling thing in what was a puzzling year. How about that?
Yeah, especially when you've got a quarterback that can do that when your offensive line is struggling. Help them out by having a running quarterback too. When Chris Rodriguez wasn't in there the first 4 games, that would have been a big part. I mean, I know they're 4-0, but still would have been a big part. And it makes the defense defend you differently if they know the quarterback's a threat to run. But if you're watching film, it's okay. They're not running Levis anymore. I mean, yeah, he has that capability, but if he's being told not to run and he's not running, that also kind of hampers you what you can do offensively. So Scangarello, I really feel like he just made a lot of mistakes with Kentucky. It kind of felt like, and we talked about, I think last spring or after he was named to be the new offensive coordinator, that, you lose Cohen, he's go back to the NFL to be the Rams offensive coordinator. You go dip back into the NFL, get a guy from that Shanahan McVay tree. So you figure you're running pretty much the same offense. And really, if you just watch the formations didn't look much different. But just small little details like that, and then just kind of some other stuff that they just didn't do that looked really, I think Cohen was more creative than Scangarello. I think the offense, a lot of the times when I watch Kentucky, which I did watch every game, didn't watch every snap like you did, they seem very vanilla.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you made the point, one-dimensional, I think. If you're not going to have, one of your biggest things last year was Levis running the ball, if you take that away, then as you said, he's just going to draw back and pass, so you can just bring everybody keyed on him and go from there. There was some people that made points, like on Twitter or whatever during the season that, maybe after watching this year, that those last couple of years in San Francisco, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo really wasn't the issue out there. So, and you think about just going back to yesterday, Brock Purdy had just the incredible game against Tampa. So, maybe it is the system. I don't know. And Scangarello will probably end up right back in the NFL and be very, very successful. It's just one of those things. Sometimes it doesn't work out, and then you have to, make a change. But at the same time, I think will be Kentucky's, assuming that Cohen is coming back, this will be their fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years. So, which is not, because you think about, if you have Cohen next year, you had Scangarello last year, you had Cohen the year before, then you had Eddie Gran before that, and everybody wasn't a big fan of Eddie Gran, but by about game 7 this year, it was like, can we have Eddie Gran back? So
that's bad.
Yeah,
hey, but he would have ran the quarterback. We know that
he would have run. But the funny thing is, he's still on this. He's on the UK staff, even though Stoops fired him as offensive coordinator. He's still like in a consultant role. So he could have just rolled out there, and done something. But yeah, so now they're going to be on their fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years, which is not the most positive thing you want to see. But like I said, that's where we are right now. Like I said, I think had Levis, I said injuries may have been a big part of it. That he had to my knowledge, I've never had turf toe, but I've heard it's pretty painful and pretty hard to get over, especially if you're an athlete who's basically you have to run all the time. So like I said, you talked about Mel Kiper. I think Kiper, the last thing I saw, had him like his third overall prospect, I think, and like top quarterback prospect, which, I think it's great. I'm not sure, no offense, I'm not sure that I would put him over, a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young, somebody like that. But, Mel Kiper's, I think he had him the third best prospect behind, I think, two of the defensive guys from Georgia. Or maybe it was the guy from Georgia and then Anderson from Alabama. I don't remember the top two, but he was like the first guy, like offensive player, which just, I know you said you had a game or something some names you wanted to throw out at me. So maybe this is a good time for that.
Well, I originally was just going to ask you, where would you place Will Levis among the all-time Kentucky quarterbacks? That's a very easy radio show question for me to ask. But I thought of some recent really good Kentucky quarterbacks, and I'm going to ask you, would you take Will Levis or this guy of these three? And I said that will give me an idea where Kevin may see Will Levis as a Kentucky quarterback. So
I'm down for it. Let's go.
We're going in reverse. So like I told you, I did this right before we got connected here on StreamYard. Mm-hmm. So this is off the top of my head. So I don't have any of these guys' stats in front of me. So the younger audience may not know who any of these guys are, but if Google them, look them up, especially one of these names I'm going to mention, you should really look the guy out. But first up, who would you rather have at quarterback? Will Levis or Andre Woodson? Ooh,
wow! You went right for the one of the big ones there. That's a tough one. I'm gonna say I'll probably go. This is like splitting hairs. I'm gonna go Levis, actually. Maybe just by a hair. I'm trying to come up with a good reason why. Woodson was not that. Woodson. I think that the Levis is more of a double threat quarterback. Woodson was more just of a drop back passer. So just on the basis of that, I will give it to Levis. So there you go.
Okay. I have a feeling it's going to be a tougher one for this next guy I'm going to mention. Who would you rather have a quarterback, Will Levis or Jared Lorenzen?
Ooh, okay. All right. Jared.
I had a feeling.
Yeah, he is one of and for many Kentucky fans, he's the guy. He's one of the favorite people in all of Kentucky football history. And I was lucky enough, just personal story real quick. We used to do this show at the TV station I work at called Hey Kentucky. Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio fame was the host of it. And he had different people on as co-hosts, and he had Jared on a few times. And he was just like the greatest guy ever to like be around and work with. And it's just, horrible and sad that he's no longer with us. But anyway, not to go on a downer, but as far as, I mean, like I said, Lorenzen is probably maybe my all-time favorite Kentucky Wildcat. And he could just, he could run the ball, obviously, and he sure as heck could sling it. So I will go with Lorenzen on that one. I'll take Levis over Woodson, but I'll take Lorenzen over Levis.
Okay, so I have a feeling. I don't know. I think I have a feeling where you're going to go with this last one. And you probably know who I'm about to compare him to or ask. But who would you rather have a quarterback, Will Levis or Tim Couch?
I thought you were going to say, no, I'm just kidding.
Who's Shane Boyd?
Shane Boyd was, Shane Boyd was there right at the end when Jared Lorenzen was there. He was also a really good player for Kentucky.
They had the biggest quarterback room in the Southeast Conference, hands down, when Jared Lorenzen and Shane Boyd were both there. Absolutely,
100%. I got to go with Couch on that one because he's probably the greatest. Probably goes down as the greatest quarterback in Kentucky history. Came in at a time when the program was down. It was huge for, then quarterback Coach Bill Curry to get him in here, even though he didn't run the system. I will never forget Kentucky trying to play Florida, and they're down like 60-0, and you have Tim Couch out there trying to run the wishbone or the option. Now, if you can imagine that's how bad it was, like in the mid '90s in some of those games. And then you bring in, and I got to take a moment, thoughts and prayers for Mike Leach, hoping that he pulls through for this. But as you mentioned Tim Couch, it was kind of that perfect storm. They brought in Hal Mumme and then brought in Mike Leach as the offensive coordinator. And then, kind of the air raid really got going. They really got that air raid going here at Kentucky, and he was the perfect quarterback for that system, perfect quarterback at the perfect time. And, finished fourth in the Heisman balloting. I think it was in 98 or 99, and even got me to renounce my Bengals fandom for a few years when he was the first pick of the Browns when they came back in as the expansion Cleveland Browns. And of course he got, speaking of offensive lines, he was behind like one of the worst offensive lines ever, and just got, smacked around for years. And but people don't, little stat, until Baker Mayfield won a game, was it last year or 2 years ago? Tim Couch was the last Cleveland quarterback to lead them to the playoffs back in like 2000 or 2001. The unfortunate thing was Couch got hurt in the last game of the season and didn't get to play in the playoffs. But
remember that Kelly Holcomb was for trivia. People,
you're right.
You're going to press your friends. Who was the quarterback? Right. It was Kelly Holcomb.
You're exactly right. I would take Levis over Woodson, and then the other two over Levis. But it's not like a huge gap. It's not like here to here. It's not. And I would have loved to see what Levis could have done in 4 years here at Kentucky. I think he could have 4 years with some of the stats that he put up just in those two. I think he could have done. He would. He's already etched himself in UK lore, because I think he's probably the only quarterback, at least that I know of, who's gone undefeated against both Louisville and Florida. Because I don't think that's ever, happened. So otherwise, but anyway, so there you go. Yeah. So Tim Couch, like I said, Lorenzen, Levis, and then Woodson, if you're going 1 through 4. And I'm sure there's people out there that'll be like, no, and they'll have a different order. But that's how I would rank them. So,
all right. So I know it would be interesting, it'd be a good way to kind of gauge your thoughts on where Levis kind of was sitting at. Which it's kind of unfair to compare any quarterback to Jared Lorenzen, just because he just got the fan appreciation that he's just loved by so many. I don't think just Kentucky fans, just football fans altogether. I still remember. I cannot remember who they were playing. Any other quarterback was sacked at this moment. He took the ball, and people, I'm actually going to demonstrate this a little bit for the people watching on YouTube. He basically had his back to the defense, to the offense or whatever, and just flung the ball about 20 yards over his head. And I believe a Kentucky receiver caught it. And then and it was still not enough for the first down. But it's like,
right.
What if and who was going to do a cornerback blitz on Jared Lorenzo? It's like a gnat trying to jump on him. And I'm not, for people out there might want to go, I'm not fat shaming or anything like that. I'm just saying he was a big guy.
No,
they said he was always a biscuit away from 300 pounds. I mean,
he was no. He wasn't called the hefty lefty and the Pillsbury throw boy for nothing. I want to say that game was against Georgia. Now, don't quote me on that, but he had a similar play against Florida one year, and that one got intercepted and ended up, Florida won that game and won and kept their streak going against Kentucky. But yeah, no, he did some incredible, remarkable things, especially for a guy his size. He was just, he was definitely one of a kind. There'll never be another Jared Lorenzen, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quickly, as we're heading toward 40 minutes. I didn't even realize we've been talking that long. We've been talking 40 minutes. But anyways, also the Music City Bowl is coming up against Iowa on the 31st, 11 o'clock Central Time. Of course, 12 o'clock where Kevin's at. Iowa is a 2.5-point favorite. Me and you were talking off air that this is a over-under of around 31 points. Now, right. Iowa is a really good defense. Not just when you look at the Big Ten nationally. Nationally, they are a fourth in FBS in yards allowed, around 277 yards allowed. They're good at causing turnovers, but they are dreadful on offense. They are the worst offense in the Big Ten. But what's funny, they almost made the Big Ten championship game. That's how good their defense is. Of course, all the players will not be playing for Kentucky. Will Levis is not playing. Chris Rodriguez is not playing. His backup, Kavase Smoke, has hit the transfer portal. He's not playing. Right. So just what are your thoughts going into the Music City Bowl with Kentucky and Iowa?
Yeah.
6-3.
The bowl, the whole bowl thing, spent the whole time telling us how they don't want the same two teams to play in back-to-back seasons, even if it's different bowls. So my whole thing, I had Kentucky. I had Kentucky in the Music City Bowl, but I had them playing either Illinois or Minnesota. And because Kentucky – man, excuse me, Phillip. I'm sorry. Apologize, everyone.
We got to hurry up and end this. So
I got gagged on something. Anyway, Kentucky hasn't played Illinois in over 100 years, and they've never played Minnesota. And so, but apparently this is the game that the Music City Bowl wanted. They wanted Kentucky and they wanted Iowa. They wanted that rematch. And like I said, we're here now. And you and I were talking before we went on that people, if you go and look at these bowl game, like viewers guides or viewers indexes, the Music City Bowl, some people, I've seen a couple people have them ranked at number one, and it's more like the whole morbid curiosity of, will this be like a 6-3 game, or will this be, something like that? Because they said Levis is not going to play, Rodriguez is not going to play, Petrus for Iowa, he's injured, their quarterback, he's not going to play. In a perfect world, as a Kentucky fan, Deuce Hogan would come in and lead Kentucky to victory. For those who may not know, Deuce Hogan was at Iowa, one of their quarterbacks. He transferred out of Iowa after Kirk Ferentz made this really, really weird comment about when Petrus and whoever the backup was like, and Hogan said the comment about Hogan may have to start, and says, well, if Hogan's going to start, we might as well just forfeit, which just seemed like totally, I guess it was meant to be a joke or whatever, or not be taken seriously. But, like the next week, he was in the transfer portal and ended up in Kentucky. So in a perfect world, you'd have Deuce Hogan leading Kentucky to a victory, like 9-6, or, they go back to years ago, Matt Roark, when Kentucky hadn't beat Tennessee in 25 years, when both the quarterbacks were hurt. And so they had a wide receiver. They brought him in from wide receiver. And he, basically ran the ball and led Kentucky to a 10-7 victory, kind of like what they did with Lynn Bowden a few years ago when Terry Wilson was hurt, Sawyer Smith was hurt. Like I said, I'm at the point, anytime, because Kentucky went so many years without going to bowl games, and you think this is the seventh straight now, under Stoops. Lost the first two, won the last four. This is Kentucky's sixth trip to the Music City Bowl, which is more than anyone. They won in '99, lost to Syracuse. 2006 and 2007 went back-to-back years, beat Clemson and Florida State, lost to Clemson in '09, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was Dabo Swinney's first game as head coach at Clemson. And then 2017 lost to Northwestern in the infamous Benny Snell ejection game. So you're going to have Kaya Sharon probably at quarterback for Kentucky with Destin Wade, possibly the backup. He's a freshman out of Nashville, highly touted player. Has not played at all this year, but he's kind of that dual threat quarterback type. Can run the ball, also has a great arm. Maybe you could see him out there. And then, like I said, then you have Deuce Hogan, and you talked about Kavase Smoke. He's in the transfer portal. Michael Drennan's in the transfer portal. Basically, you're going to have like Juton McClain and Lavelle Wright are probably going to be Kentucky's two running backs. And then you still have Brown and Key, who we talked about earlier. So like I said, anytime I'm not to the point, I'd never take a bowl game for granted. And the other thing also, you've probably seen this online, the game is the exact same time as the Kentucky-Louisville basketball game. So this also happened in 2017, but the basketball game was like noon, and the bowl game was at like 4 or 5 o'clock. So it was later in the day. So you didn't have – so now you're making, on top of everything else, going back to the whole basketball, football school, you're making, the team – the Big Blue Nation. Okay, do we go to the Louisville? Do we go to the basketball game? Do we go to Nashville? So I'll be interested to see what kind of attendance Kentucky, because Kentucky by reputation, I should say, travels really, really well for bowl games. And but we'll see what happens this year, because like I said, Louisville is, I don't know if you followed it at all, but Louisville is just really, really awful. In basketball right now. I'm not sure if they've even won a game yet, and that's with former Kentucky assistant Kenny Payne as their head coach. So, like I said, I never take a bowl game for granted, and I'm still excited about it. There's a lot of people in the fan base that have already checked out. It's like, why are we playing Iowa again? Why do we have to go to Nashville? Reportedly, the Las Vegas Bowl was really interested in Kentucky, but either the staff or athletic department, nixed that idea, because the only problem with the Las Vegas Bowl, while it would be fun to go to Vegas, it's that weekend before signing day. And you'd rather spend that time out there on the recruiting trail. So I think it's how we ended up with Florida out there in Las Vegas as opposed to Kentucky. But like I said, I'm excited. I don't know that I'm going to be able to, predict a Kentucky win, especially if, if Campbell and Merriweather, I haven't heard that neither one of them are going to opt out of the game. So, I said I could easily see, I had 31 points. I probably would still take the under. So,
yeah, it's going to be fun. Honestly, well, I have both TVs. I have both TVs on because I also have the Alabama-Kansas State Sugar Bowl, which I don't know when the Sugar Bowl has ever been played at 11 o'clock, but we're going to get that this time around, so it'll be fun. But you know what? I will close on this note. I will close on this comment. John Calipari did say he hopes Kentucky goes to a lot of bowls every year. He said he wants it. So right. Calipari is getting what he wanted from Kentucky football. It seems. I'm not going to let that comment die. I am never going to let it go, even as somebody that's not even a Kentucky fan.
Oh, the basketball football school thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's something that should never have been, something that never should have been said, and then like I said, it just didn't. It wasn't handled. It wasn't handled the right way by like all parties. And Stoops and Calipari have made up, I think. But yeah, it got out of hand. And then of course, when Kentucky was 4-0, it was like, well, hey, football school. And as you said, then they struggled down the stretch. Lost to Vanderbilt, and and we'll see. We'll see what happens in the bowl game. Like I said, for Kentucky, but on the flip side, Kentucky, basketball, the last couple of years has not been what you would say up to Kentucky standards. Going 9-16 in the COVID year, and not even making the tournament, and then losing to St. Peter's in the first round. But as we like to say, St. Peter's was obviously the greatest 15 seed in the history of the NCAA tournament because they made it to like the Elite Eight or whatever. So, so hopefully this season with Oscar Tshiebwe being back will be a little bit of redemption. For Kentucky this year, because honestly, I think Calipari kind of needs it, because you think about going back to, everybody talks about the 2015 game against Wisconsin, that the program hasn't been the same since. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but you could make the case because they haven't, they've lost, I think, in 2 Elite Eights and two Elite Eights, 2 Sweet 16s, and then didn't make the tournament and lost in the first round since then. So, they've been there twice. Of course, Auburn got them in 2019, and then North Carolina in 2017. And, I've the whole John Higgins thing, whatever. There were lots. Higgins, the referee, the whole thing, that may have been part of it, but there were a lot of things that could have been done on the Kentucky end that shouldn't even matter. But we won't. That's another time for another discussion. So
we'll see on that conversation. But anyways, Kevin, we've almost talked 50 minutes here, all things Kentucky football. It's always good having you on the show. But before we get out of here, where can listeners and viewers check out your work? Obviously, over there at Last Word on College Football, where I also write, of course.
Yep. Last Word on College Football, or at Kevin McGuffey, the cleverly titled Twitter name. Because I've told you the story before. I tried when I first joined Twitter. I tried like 8 different variations of like my nickname in high school. McGuffey was McGruff, the whole crime dog thing. And so I tried like, I don't know how many different variations of that, and none of them worked. I said, okay, fine. If somebody has at Kevin McGuffey, then I guess I'll be at the Kevin McGuffey. Anyway, but yes, at Kevin McGuffey on Twitter is probably the easiest way. Or the Last Word on CFB Twitter handle as well, where you can check out Phillip's great work and everybody else there. Coming up, we'll have, I don't know if we're the only site that does it, but we'll have coverage, previews and coverage of every bowl game leading up to the championship game. You and I were talking off the air. One of the games I'm most excited about is that Troy Texas San Antonio game. Of course, Troy has the Kentucky connection with John Schlarman. Not John Schlarman. I just had a total brain cramp there.
John Summerall.
John Summerall, yes. Oh my gosh, I apologize, everyone. John Schlarman, of course, was the offensive line coach at Kentucky, who sadly passed away a couple years ago. Battle with cancer. Who coined the phrase "the big blue wall." But yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you what, though, if and when the day that Stoops leaves, if I'm the AD, that's my first call. Because he's just, what he's done, and you follow it a lot closer than I do, but what Summerall has done down there in just that first season has been pretty remarkable, at least looking at it from our standpoint up here in Kentucky.
Yeah, the only difference is a lot of Troy fans wish they would have knocked that ball down against Appalachian State. Then they would only have one loss on the year, and that would have been to Ole Miss. And we could have been talking about Troy as a New Year's Six team,
right?
Because you would have won 12 straight games if you would have ran the string out, like if everything happened like it did. Other than that, your only loss would have been 28-10 to Ole Miss, and I think it would have been interesting to see if they could have got up there as a New Year's Six.
Right, as opposed to Tulane. That would have really been something. I'd kind of forgotten about that, the whole Appalachian State thing, and with that mirror, I'm sure they would like to forget. Everybody would like to forget about it, but
they do. Trust me, the diehard Troy fans do not want to hear about that. They are still sick over it.
Right, because I mean, what like I said, what Coach Summerall has done in this first season has just been remarkable. So, and like I said, I'm thrilled to death for him for what he's done down there. Like I said, that would be my first, if and when Stoops ever leaves, that would be my first call. So, as a replacement. So we'll see what happens.
we'll see what happens on down the road. And Kevin, as always appreciate you coming on the show. We always have good conversation about Kentucky football, and we usually jump off on other topics as well. There you go with the probably
my Gator Bowl shirt on. Yeah, so
with maybe you'll be adding to a Music City Bowl T-shirt coming up. But anyways, Kevin, it's always fun to have you on the show, and I look forward to doing this again sometime later on down the road.
Yes, sir, Phil. Thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure awesome when you want to have me on. I really appreciate it, and congrats on all your success with all the podcasts and stuff. You do a really great job, and continued success in the future, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Kevin. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Remember, you check out all my written work over on Last Word on College Football. We'll have some Auburn stuff here soon. Got some bowl previews up as well on my end over there on Last Word on College Football. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You check out a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can watch the show over on YouTube, over at the Phillip Jordan Show YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I'll read it on a future edition of the show. You can also email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. We'll be back on Thursday. It's going to be very familiar for you guys. I'm going to be joined by Matt Lowe from lowdownsports.com. We are going to predict every single bowl game. That will be in your feed on Thursday morning. Really looking to having Matt on once again. We took a week off. We're going to do some one last time picking games. So it's going to be a lot of fun having Matt on. We got a lot of bowl games to go through. I'm just going to let you guys know there's a lot of games we won't go deep diving into, but other games we will. So just let you guys know that. We're not just doing SEC ones. We're going to do every single one of them. So it should be a lot of fun. Anyways, guys, appreciate checking out the show. Let kindness be your compass, and you've been listening to the Phillip Jordan Show.